Awesome. All right, so where we're going to pick up today is on page 76. And we're right after the 7-step prayer. And we're in the chapter Into Action. And what we're going to be talking about today is steps 8 and 9. And so we're kicking off the third full paragraph. Now we need more action, which I don't know about you. That's a little rude, the whole thing into action. I just did all this action. I did a 4-step. I did a 5th step. Had a quiet hour. Okay, no, fair enough. I did get my quiet hour. I got some rest. Okay, got my 6 and 7, but now I got to roll into 8 and 9. And so that's what we're talking about, into action. And it says, without which that we find that faith without works is dead. And that's an important theme that we see all throughout the book. Faith without works is dead. And what faith without works is dead means. Because maybe you've been in meetings and people say it and people chant it. It's like, what is that? So often I'll be in meetings and people say things and faith without works or half measures. And I don't know about you, when I was new to the rooms, I wasn't going to ask people questions. You know what I mean? I am not going to point myself out. I do not, because you might ask me something in return, like how's it going? And I don't know how to answer that. So I'm not talking to you. But what does it mean? Faith without works is dead. That means belief. Belief in the power of God, or belief in the power of AA or CA or DAA or whatever 12-step fellowship you're a part of, or belief in the power of the steps without action is dead. So if I have belief but I don't have action, I'm going to relapse. Yeah. I went over the stuff in the chat. Listen, if you want to get me on tangents, throw it in the chat. But also, if you got questions, throw it in the chat. And I saw the thing about the setting aside the set aside prayer, laying aside the lay aside prayer. Here for that. All right. And so it says, let's look at steps 8 and 9. And I kind of want to share this story with you guys because it's helped me to see steps 8 and 9 in the book Alcoholics Anonymous in a whole new way. And this was a couple years ago. A friend of mine, she was chairing a meeting, and chairing just means sort of that facilitating. And in Canada, in parts of Canada, we call on people to share, that sort of thing. And she was going to chair a meeting for the first time. And she's like, Paige, can you come and support me? And I love supporting people. Like, that is my favorite thing. Like, I'm tempted to have Scott turn around the camera so I can cheer on the soccer team. Go Sports! You know what I mean? I love supporting people. I love encouraging people. So it's like, heck yeah, I'm there. And I go to the meeting. And she asked me, hey, could you read something on step 8? And I'm like, absolutely. Now, as you guys probably figured out, I'm a big book gal. I love the big book. And so what am I going to do? I'm going to grab from the big book. And so I read the paragraph that I'm on. I read the next paragraph, a couple paragraphs, kicking it off at the start. Oh, that's a great question. I will make sure I get that connected for you after the meeting. Don't you worry. It's about the WhatsApp. It's like, how do you get connected on the WhatsApp? I'm like, we'll get you connected. Don't you worry. But I did want you to know I acknowledge. But I'm at this meeting, and so I just read those, 2 paragraphs, and the first person to come in, and you can kind of tell it's this guy's meeting. Not that we own meetings, but it's this guy's meeting. And yeah, welcome. We're glad you're here. And he goes, there's F all about step 8 in the big book. It's all in the 12 and 12. And like the spiritual giant that I am, is I caught a resentment right away. I'm like, that mother. And again, so what did I do? And you should be concerned about the order. The first thing I did was I wrote some inventory on it. And just so you guys know what came from that inventory, I try to get my value and worth from being right, from being seen as right. I'm sure nobody relates to that. I got to be Miss 12 step. I got to have all the answers. I care about what I think people think about me. You could see all that. And so after that, this is a little alarming. I began to see this writing on 8 and 9 in a new way. So in the big book, it's not step 8 and then step 9. It is step 8 and 9 interwoven and intertwined. And it was only because that guy said that thing, and I maybe had that a little bit of a desire to prove him wrong, which is so spiritually healthy. It's not good. It's a defect is what that is. ties into me being pedantic. Some of you guys know, oh girl, she pedantic. But that helped me to see this book in a new way. And so what we're going to do is we're going to really dive into step 8 today, but we're probably also going to dive into step 9. And we're going to see as we continue on over the next few weeks about how 8 and 9 are intertwined and interwoven. And what is step 8 all about? Step 8 is about a list and is about willingness. And 9 is about going out and making the amends. So really what 8 is about is preparing myself for the amends process. So let's keep reading. I say as if I'm not the one holding us up from the reading. Let's get back to the reading. It's on me. I'm the problem. All right. But God's the solution. We got that. All right. It says we have a list of all persons we have harmed and to whom we are willing to make amends. Well, that's good news. That saves me from having to do some work. I have a list. Where did I get this list? Well, it says we made it when we took inventory. And so where do the names in my 8-step list come from? Well, I don't know about you, but here's what happened to me. I came to my resentments and I started to think, man, these guys are a bunch of jerks. And then I found out that I was the jerk. And not only was I the jerk, I was the jerk first. And in a lot of cases, most of those cases, there was an amend to make. And so I would get them from my resentments list. And then, I don't know about you, but I had a look at my sex conduct, also known as my sex harms list. And those are some areas in my life in which I caused harm. So I took those names and I put them on my 8-step list. And for me, it just a list. Now, I'm sure you guys are doing that thing that I do, which is immediately have questions, but I'm not going to ask them, right? And it's because, like, what do I do? What do I do if I know I owe an amend? I have that amend on my heart, but I didn't write on them in my resentments. And maybe they weren't in my sex or relationship conduct. What do I do? Well, we definitely want to overthink it and overcomplicate it. Yeah, just add it to the list. You know what I mean? Just add it to the list. There likely will be people, at least from my experience, that I didn't write resentment inventory on, or I didn't write sex inventory on, but there might be people or organizations or institutions that I know in my heart. I know I did them wrong. I know there's an amends to clean up. Oh man, and I'm going to ruin some of your days. Please don't leave yet. I'm going to ruin your days. Log out, log out, log out. How do I know if something should go on my 8-step list? Well, I don't know about you, but again, for me, if that person's name or that organization's name, or I see them in a meeting and I get that little twist in my stomach, that little knot that goes, I probably owe them an amends. In fact, more often than not, when I got there's an amends to make. I know some of you are like, God, we're not even, well, no, we're 12 minutes in and you've ruined my day. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And I will make sure I follow it up with a very formal amends. A sorry is not an amends. I'm sure I'll get there. All right, so I've got this list. And one of the things it says now, so we subjected ourselves to a drastic self-appraisal. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I have not had a look at that 4-step and that 5th step and thought, whoa, guys, that was pretty drastic, it's an indication it might not be too thorough. So if I'm trying to, like, hey, have I been fearless and thorough in my 4th step? Am I missing anything? Well, if I can look back and think, boy, that was a drastic self-appraisal, rock and roll, we were thorough. And it says, now we go out to our fellows. And that is an important thing. I've got to go and find the people or the organizations or the institutions to which I have caused harm. I've got to go find them. Now, those of us who've spent any time in and around the 9th step, you guys know God absolutely will throw people in our path. Like, absolutely, that will happen. God does that. But I'm not banking on that. And I'm not simply counting on that. Listen, I have yet to have like a person on my 9th or on my 8-step list just wander into the basement and say, how's it going, Paige? You know what I mean? I've got to go out and find them. Now we go out. I've got to seek to try to make these amends. And it says, and repair the damage done in the past. And Rob put in the chat where it says amends. A definition, a return for something lost or suffered, to set right something that is wrong, and usually through the fault of another. Me, I'm the one at fault, if we're wondering, it's me. but it says, and repair the damage done in the past. And so what is an amend? It is to repair the damage I have done, to repair or to restore. Now, in Canada, we have a government system. You guys watched all of my grade 10 like civics lessons just leave my brain, like just gone. I'm like, oh, we have a House of Commons. I think we have a House of Parliament. Oh, I don't know how the government works. Just left my brain. But when a piece of legislation is amended, what do the politicians do? They don't sit around in the House of Commons or the other one, forgot it again. They don't sit around in government going, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. They don't do that. Even in Canada, I know the stereotype, it doesn't hold true. That's not what they do. What they do is they go and they change the bill. They repair it, they restore it to what its original intention was. So it is important for me to understand an amends is not an apology. An amends is not a sorry. Now, I'm not black and white. I'm pretty loosey-goosey with a lot of things. If a sorry comes out during the amends process, we don't have to like, oh no, I've ruined the whole thing. You know what I mean? Sometimes we get a little rigid like that. I'm sure no one can relate to rigidity and overthinking. But if that sorry comes out, it's not the end of the world. But I know what it's like when we come to the rooms and step 9 is a topic, and it's like, man, I can't possibly make amends. I've said sorry 1,000 times. I've said sorry 1,000,000 times, and it's important to understand the amends process is very different than a sorry. The amends is about restoring. It's about repairing. It is about making right. And I also want to talk about, it says, we attempted to sweep away the debris which has accumulated out of our effort to live on self-will and run the show ourselves. So we're referencing that third step when we were trying to be the director, telling all the other actors what to do. And what are we amending? It's not just my drunken shenanigans or my harms that I did when I was in my active addiction. What I am amending is the harms caused by me living on self-will. And that is important. And listen, let me tell you, sometimes there's a nice little buffer if I'm amending stuff that I did when I was absolutely tanked. It's a little harder to be like, listen, I was stone cold sober and absolutely selfish, inconsiderate, and like full of, self-centeredness that caused you harm. You know what I mean? It's a little, that ego deflation process. I mean, it's valuable on the other end. All right. And it says, if we haven't the will to do it, we ask until it comes. And so if I am struggling with willingness, this is our first direction on how we can build willingness to make amends. It says we ask. And in this book, anytime it says we ask, what is that? That is a prayer. So if I am struggling with willingness and direction, and man, if we're struggling with willingness with any spiritual action, you know what I can always do is I can always pray for willingness. And then here, this is on page 58. Y'all remember when I was pointing out, like, hey, am I willing to go to any lengths? Or do I want what you guys have? And am I willing to go to any lengths? I'm like, this is going to bite us in the butt. Here is the butt biting time. I said it before I thought about it, and that's how it came out of my face. All right, so when we said I'm willing to go to any lengths, here's where it's going to bite us. It says, remember, it was agreed at the beginning that we would go to any lengths for victory over alcohol. Man, who would have thought that me agreeing to something would, I'd have to be held accountable for my actions or something, my agreements. And so that's the first way in which we have to build willingness. But I want to talk a little bit about the list and about one way in which we can organize the list. Now, it doesn't tell me to organize this list in this way in the big book, so feel free to disregard it. I'm going to offer it to you. You don't have to, you can be like, that sucks and I hate you. I hate you might be a little dramatic, and I suggest toning it down a little bit. But this is a really practical way in which I have found that we can organize the 8-step list. So what I do is I take my list and I put pen to paper on it. I take my list And what I do is I just write it out. I grab it from the fore, I grab it from my heart, I grab it from my gut, and I write it down. I just make a list. That's all I do. And then what can be really helpful is to organize that list into columns of willingness. And my right now is people that I'd be, or organizations that I'd be willing to make amends to right now. Doesn't matter where they live. Doesn't matter if they're alive or dead. Doesn't matter if I owe them money and I can't afford to pay it. It's just, where am I willing to make amends? And then the ones where I'm like, you know what? I am willing, but I'd like to get a few under my belt. I can put those ones in the later column. And then if there's ones I'm feeling a little diffident, is what the book would be talking about here in a minute. But if I'm feeling a little unsure, if I put them in my maybe. And then I've got my never, which is my F no, over my dead body, absolutely not page. Have you lost your mind list? And I populate the list. And what that does, and it's really practical. And the reason it's practical is because the approach that most people take is, if I'm willing to make the amends that are right now, do you know what ones I'm going to start with? Mostly, I'm going to start with the right now amends. And how do those go? Well, they tend to go well. And that helps build and cultivate that willingness. And then what that does is that gives me an opportunity to see the ones that I'm hesitant about. And the ones I'm hesitant about, what I can do is I can begin to take that to prayer, and I can begin to pray for willingness. If I've got a lot of fear around making those amends, you know what I can do? I can write some fear inventory around those ones in my maybe and my never list. If I'm feeling that resentment come back up, man, I can write some inventory around that. And so those are some ways in which I can build willingness. And I can, for my laters and my maybes, I can start writing out the amends. And oftentimes writing out the amends ahead of time can help prepare me for the amends. I can't tell you how many times I sit down with the sponsee and they're like, man, I don't know about this amends. I'm like, okay, well, let's write it out together. Let's do it together. And then I get an idea of what they want to say and how they want to say it. And they're like, oh, I could do that. I could do that. And so that is the most practical way in which we can, sort of build the willingness, start with our right nows and move towards our nevers, and build that momentum and take some action. But listen, right now I've got 3 sponsees, and they are I've got more than 3, but I have 3 sponsees who have earned this title. And the title is Amends Badass. And so if you want to know how you become an amends badass, how you do it is you start with the never list. And the thought process behind that is like, man, if these are the amends that I absolutely never want to make, if I rip off that Band-Aid and I go to it and I make those amends, well, it's all downhill from there. It's all easy from there. And I want you to know, if you're here today and you're not sure, or you're like, you know what, heck, I might do that. I might rip off the Band-Aid. If you do that, I will do for you what I've done for my sponsees, which my amends badass sponsees, I purchase for them. Yes, bribery is how I build willingness in the 8-step 2. I purchased for them a little patch that says amends badass that they can sew onto their whatever. So if you want an amends badass patch, you can just start with your nevers, and I will waste my money on that. So that, and also you guys are getting another lens into my sponsorship style, which some of you are going to be like, it's bribery. It's bribery. It absolutely is. It gets it done. Can't argue with the results. So those are some ways in which we can build willingness. And I'll talk about some more ways in which some other ways we have in which we can build willingness that are in the book. And then I'm going to talk about some other ways in which I've helped people build willingness, which is absolutely not in the book. And again, I'm prefacing that with feel free to disregard, although it's a little fun. So join us with the shenanigans. All right. So it says, bottom of page 76, it says, probably there are still some misgivings. We're not feeling so sure about this whole amends thing. And it says, as we look over the list of business acquaintances and friends we've hurt, we may feel diffident, which is to say, perhaps a little unsure about going to some of them on a spiritual basis. Let us be reassured. To some people, we need not and probably should not emphasize the spiritual feature on the first approach. So that first approach is what I like to call the approach. And that's where we find the people that we have, caused harm to, and we reach out to them, we make that approach message. And I'll talk about it a little bit more later, but that approach message can be something like, I'm in a 12-step fellowship, and part of that process requires that I reflect upon my life. And in so doing, I saw that I caused you harm. I would like to, if you would allow me the opportunity to sit down with you and make that right. You don't have to tell them you're in 12 step. You don't have to mention that. You could just say, I've been reflecting upon our relationship, and I can see that I've caused a lot of harm to you. I would like to, if you would allow me to make it right, if you'd be open to schedule a time. Something like that. You can say it however you want. And actually, listen, anyone here ever have some Facebook stalking problems? Nobody is admitting to, oh, we got some, yeah. Listen, this is where we get real handy in the 8-step list. You know what I mean? I got to find these people. So we can use that defect in God's hands. It can become an asset. I'm just joking about things, but yeah, we got to go find them. Where am I going to find them? Well, Facebook or social media, if we got contact information, I've got to go find them. And so, yeah, and how I make the approach is I approach with whatever sort of way I have to contact them. So if I have their number, I can text or call. Sometimes we have to send Facebook friend requests and, do these things that feel uncomfortable. But man, I tell you, there's value. So that is what the first approach is. And what is cautioning in us about saying is like, hey, we're not going to show up. Listen, I am a spiritual being. I have found a power greater than myself. Look at me. I'm hoity-toity. That's not what we're doing. That's what it's warning us against. It says we might prejudice them. So we might, cause them to have these old beliefs about an experience that they might not have had. And it says at the moment we are trying to put our lives in order, but this is not an end in itself. So here is why we make amends. Yes, I need to make amends so that I stay sober. Yes, I need to make amends so that I'm able to live a happy, contented life. But this is the reason why I make amends. It says our real purpose is to fit ourselves to be of maximum service to God and the people about us. That is why we make amends. And I kind of joke about this when I work with sponsees. Sometimes they'll say, I'm willing to make amends because I know it's about me. It's not about the other person. And I don't say anything because they're willing to make amends. You'll catch my sponsorship style. And then sometimes they're like, I'm willing to make amends because I know it's not about me. It's about the other person. And I don't say anything because they're willing to make amends. But the truth is why we make amends. It's a continuation. It's a fulfillment of the promise that we made in step 3. That I'm going to go out from here and I'm going to work for God and be of maximum service to God and his fellows. And again, it ties into what we said last week in the 7th-step prayer. Remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. And so these defects of character, I needed to be free of them. And what do? I go out to make amends. And man, I don't know about you, but those of us who've gone out and made amends, and I'm saying that, if you haven't, we're going to talk about different strategies, how we can go out and make amends. I promise we wouldn't do this. I would not do this. There's nothing worse than an unmade amends. You know what I mean? Every time you go to a meeting, it's like, let's talk about step 8 or step 9. And you're like, oh man, nothing worse than an unmade amends. I wouldn't do it if it doesn't work. It works. But how often we go and I'll answer that question. Just that, how often we go to, how often we show up to an amends, and that amends turns into something like a 12-step call. Maybe it's the person we're amending the relationship with, or maybe they're like, oh, you're an alcoholic or you're an addict. I have a friend of mine. Would you be willing to talk to them? How often God can use us if I just get me out of the way. And I've got a question in the chat. And it says, do we have to ask permission first if we can meet, talk with them to make them amends, give them a heads up? I like to do it that way. And sometimes I have to do it that way in the sense of how else am I going to, I'm not my family or my direct family, but if it's like an old coworker that I haven't spoken to in 5 years, I kind of got to explain why I want to meet for coffee, or if they're not open for coffee, why I got to have a phone call. It's not, there's, that principle call there's nothing worse than a text message that's like, we need to talk. There's just, I don't want to do that to somebody. So I try to be transparent. And I also know what it's like when you're living with somebody and yeah, we're an old ex. Yeah. We want to be very clear. If we're reaching out to exes, why we're reaching out. I think that's important. So actually, this is a tangent off the original question. Woo. Why would I reach out to it, or how would I reach out to an ex to make amends? And I find it important to really say, like, this is what I'm here to do. I am here to make it right. I'm not here to reopen anything. I'm not here to cause any further harm. So if you would prefer not to hear from me, that's okay too. And that idea of, like, if they're in a relationship with somebody else, I think it's important to acknowledge and say, I want to respect that. So that's, if we're making amends to exes, I want often that information ahead of time. But yeah, sometimes we're just living with people and we owe them an amends. And I think it's sometimes nice to give them a heads up, but sometimes people are afraid of intimacy and can be a little evasive. I get it. Sometimes when you live with somebody and you're like, dude, could you just accept my amends? Sometimes you can just roll it into a conversation. But I think on the whole, consent is good, you know? And yeah, I can't lure people into, I don't want to lure anyone anywhere. I'll just be transparent about why I want to meet, why I want to have a phone call. You know what I'm saying? All right. So it says it is seldom wise to approach an individual who still smarts, so is still hurting from our injustice to him. Absolutely. And announce that we have gone religious. I have found spirituality. I am therefore a better person. Look at me. Look how spiritual I am. You're like, oh God, she's insufferable. It's saying don't do that. And it says in the prize ring, this would be called leading with the chin. And so what that references is boxing. And if you're in like a boxing ring, leading, like, again, we don't want to get punched in the face, presumably. Sports, I don't know, you do it how you want to do it. But I don't want to be leading with the chin. That's I got my gloves down, I got my chin out, I know I'm about to get hit. That's what that is. I'm laying myself out to be hurt. So how do I lead? I lead. Now it's going to tell us I go frank, open, and honest, but I explain that I'm here to try to set right my wrongs. I'm trying to make right the harms that I've caused. That is how I lead. Now, this is my natural segue into other ways in which I've helped sponsees and fellows build willingness. Some of you guys are familiar with Dr. Bob. And in Dr. Bob, in his story, Bill came and he's like, man, this is the first person that like shared his experience with me. Man, I'm willing to go to any lengths, not amends. I'm not willing to do that. Because he didn't want to tell people he was an alcoholic. And so he goes to a business conference in Atlantic City and he goes on a bender. Like, it is bad. He shows up to his office receptionist's house, like bad. You know, if you've got employees and you show up drunk to their house, oh, you're the boss? Like, that's not good. And so he, got sobered up. And after his roaring bender in Atlantic City, he had the willingness to do what he was not willing to do before, which I call going on an amender. So he went on a bender, he went on an amender, and which is to say he went out and he made all of those amends that he wasn't willing to make. And so in the spirit of that, I sometimes regularly create what I like to call amenders. And they're like races between sponsees or fellows. It's like a race to 5 amends or 10 amends. And yeah, we got some people here who've been in some amenders, and like we've done like battle royales, and we've had Team Canada against Team USA. It was a whole thing. It was a race to 15. Listen, I want you to know, Team Canada just smoked them. Yeah, they just crushed it. And like Cheryl, she's here. She's telling you they're fun. They're motivating. It's not taking ourselves too seriously. God bless her. We gave her a spiritual green card so that she could join Team USA and help them out. So like she carried that team. So you know what I mean? There's a lot of fun to be had in Step 8. And some of you are like, listen, I don't know if that's my experience. And keep in mind, I'm now saying as a sponsor, I have a lot of fun with Step 8. I didn't when I was on my first one. But yeah, and I'll do this whole thing. I make these fight posters, and everyone gets their little fight nickname. And is it silly? Absolutely. And some people be like, oh, it's deadly serious. Yes, but there is a vast amount of fun about it all. And to be fair, the thing that makes the difference between making that amends we don't want to make and not doing it is, I can't let America lose to Canada again. Well, heck, there's no harm, no foul. You know what I'm saying? And I've also done this thing just while I'm on willingness tangents. And again, speaking of consent, I have only ever done this with the consent of my sponsees. I did not impose this upon them. I asked them and they were willing. And a couple sponsees where what we did was we played a round of amends roulette, where we took their 8-step list and I put it on a virtual amends or a virtual roulette wheel, and we spun the wheel. Okay, not applicable if gambling is what brings you here. Don't do that. Do not recommend. But for my sponsees that don't have gambling issues, we did that a time or two, and it's shenanigans. It's fun. Hold on. Yeah, in the chat, I put a person who was a never on my amends list with no intention of ever actually making amends, but they went on the list anyways. And that's why it's so important that we put them on the list. Yes. Then 3 days later, I saw them in a tube in London. I hadn't seen them for a decade. I had the opportunity. I went over and asked if they could give me a few minutes of their time. We got off the train, got a coffee, and I made the amends. It was taken in good spirit and we parted. I've never seen them again, but that's how they jumped to the front of the queue. Absolutely. So God will put these people in our path. And that happened with one of my amends roulette. We were doing it and I was like, we were going to do it. And I was like, who's the person that you're afraid of? And she's like, it's my dad. I wouldn't ever want to make amends to my dad. And in that moment of willingness, she's like, you know what? Let's do it. And so she got her amends badass patch because that was the one she never wanted to do. And that whole relationship changed. You know, there's power in this. It's scary. Like, I'm not going to pretend it's not. Like, it's scary when I haven't done. I know it's woo, but I haven't done it because I'm sure you guys are the only one, or I'm sure you guys aren't like me, and I'm the only one that's ever like, it'll go badly. I'm going to get arrested. I'm not even making amends for a crime, but I'm going to get arrested, you know, like I just full of fear. It's going to go badly, but I'm not here trying to fix me. I'm here to try to work for God. You know what I mean? And we're going to talk about 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. Spoilers, it goes well. Shocker. All right, so we're not going to be, we're not going to lead with the chin. It says, why lay ourselves open to being branded fanatics or religious bores? We may kill a future opportunity to carry a beneficial message. Again, how often will God use the amends process to carry this message and to help others? And, you know, oftentimes with our loved ones, we're like, hey, I've been sober 30 days. Why haven't you gotten on board and forgiven me yet? You know what I mean? And we're going to talk about how 10 or 20 years of drunkenness would make a skeptic out of anyone. But, you know, oftentimes, and in these later chapters, we really transition, and it's not really a transition. It's what we've been talking about the whole time. I can't intellectualize this thing. I need to do this thing, and it is experiential. And so I've got to demonstrate, and we're going to talk about that in a sentence, but I've got to demonstrate. And to demonstrate the power of this program, go and make an amends. If, man, I got a family member that just doesn't want to get sober, it's not my job to sober them up. I can't convince them if they're not willing. But you know what's going to convince them more than me telling them to get to a meeting? Me making amends. And have the humility to do that and set right that wrong. Man, this is where lives and relationships get to change. And even when they don't, that, and my stomach goes, and there's freedom. So it says, but our man is sure to be impressed with a sincere desire to set right the wrong. That's what I'm here to do. I am here to set right the wrong, to repair, to restore. That's what the purpose of the amends is. And it says he's going to be more interested in a demonstration of goodwill, demonstrating what this power has done. You know, me telling you how great 12-step is doesn't carry any weight if I'm not actually doing 12-step. I got to demonstrate the power of these steps. A demonstration of goodwill than our talk of spiritual discoveries. That's what carries the message. Now, and again, this is that non-dual thinking. There's a lot of, it's not rigid. It's not a paradox. It's not black and white. It's like, hey, there are times where we might need to talk about God and higher power and spirituality and this way of life. And it says we don't use this as an excuse for shying away from the subject of God. When it will serve any good purpose, we are willing to announce our convictions with tact and common sense. So we got to use that good old discernment. That means to judge without being judgmental, you know? The question, so this is another way in which I could build willingness. So it says the question of how to approach the man we hated will arise. So that jerk face is on my never list, and I hate him. And not only that, it may be that he has done us more harm than we have done him, right? And isn't this the book meeting us where we're at, right? You can almost hear us, but he's done me more harm than I've done him. And we are not, and though we may have acquired a better attitude toward him, I would have done that through step 4 and step 5. We're still not too keen about admitting our faults. Nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. So the book meeting us where we're at and taking us where we need to go, putting the bit in our teeth. Now, for those that are kind of familiar with horses or not familiar, I guess it'd be for those that are not familiar with horses. When you ride a horse, the horse wears a bridle, and in the bridle, it's got a bit, and the bit goes not immediately, it goes right into the horse's mouth. And that is how you steer and direct the horse. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let God steer and God direct and God guide me. And it is a little bit in the teeth is a little like, but just bite down and just do it anyway. Grit and bear it, go and do it anyway. And that is one of the ways in which we build willingness. How do I build willingness? I go and I do it anyways. How do I build willingness to make the amends that I don't want to do? I go and do the amends I don't want to do. And as somebody who has helped out with a whole whack of amenders, a whole lot of them, one of the most effective ways in which to sort of get some momentum on step 9 is to reach out to a bunch of them right now. Just go and reach out to them. Reach out to 5 or 10 people. And I know the immediate thought is like, whoa. If everyone reaches out back to me, I won't have time. I'm going to be. That never happens. That never happens. I don't know about you. People don't get back. People, listen, we are in an age of ghosted. They're not going to text you back right away. Don't you worry. And so one of the best ways in which to build willingness is go reach out for the amends first and then go write it out. And that builds the impetus to get it done. And I found that very helpful. I've found that to be very helpful with some of my amends champions. And yes, I with one of the sponsees, we ended up getting a little mini championship belt because again, I will bribe this behavior. Not directed to do that in the big book, but that's shenanigans I will do. So we got champions and Team Canada and all that. And so nevertheless, with the person we dislike, we take the bit in our teeth. It is harder to go to an enemy than to a friend, but we find it much more beneficial to us. So there's more value in making those amends that we don't want to make. And those of us who've had that experience, man, isn't it annoying how true that is? Oh, it sucks how true that is. And it says, we go to him in a helpful and forgiving spirit. So this is how I'm called to show up: helpful, forgiven. We're going to talk about frank, open, and honest. Confessing our former ill feeling and expressing our regret. So then now what we're going to do is get into some of the directions about how we go out and actually make the amends. And it says under no condition. So this I would recommend highlighting, underlining. Most people I work with are pretty good, but this is important. Under no condition, no, absolutely not, do we criticize such a person or argue. No, this is not the time nor place to be like, but you. And actually, I kind of come to think about it. I learned a lot about how to make amends by receiving not great amends. I wasn't going to share some of these stories, but I'd learned how to make amends. And keep in mind, we will make far more amends than we ever received. But I received some not great ones. I received an amends one time from somebody that was like, so Paige, yeah, I was really judging you a whole lot. And I'm like, okay. You know, like, thank God I'm like, I wasn't too bothered about that, but I'm like, I want to be like, girl, I try to always receive them with grace. I was kind of like, girl, let's not do that. That's not helpful. I had one time I got an amends from somebody who was like, oh, and I'd also like to amend. Oh, no, not that. And I'm like, oh no, don't give me a cliffhanger in this thing. And again, I really try to receive with a lot of grace. You know what I mean? Where so I just left it, which I think, listen, that took a lot of God. And then I had, one of my best friends, when you live with somebody and you're like just really close. One of my best friends were, struggling and made an amends to me. And then, but it kicked off that like, hey, but you, and I'm like, whoa, under no conditions. So I learned a lot about amends through receiving not great ones. And here's the thing, often in AA, or 12 step, we want to show up and tell our war stories. I think men's stories are way more fun than war stories. I don't know about you. Like the men's that go well, the men's that don't, I think we should be telling those ones. Anywho, so it says, under no condition do we criticize such a person or argue. This is not the time nor the place. Simply, we tell him that we will never get over drinking until we have done our utmost to straighten out the past. So we explain, I am doing this so that I can stay sober. I'm doing this because it is a vital part of my recovery. It says we're there to sweep off our side of the street. So all I'm there to do, we don't say it like that. We're not like, I'm here to sweep off just mine. You have a side. No, just mine. No, we're not saying that. But that idea, I'm here to set right my wrongs. I'm here to take responsibility for the things that I have done. Realizing that nothing worthwhile can be accomplished until we do so. Never trying to tell him what he should do. So we're not, hey, but you, nope, that's not in this part. It says his faults are not discussed. We stick to our own. If our manner is calm, frank, and open. So to show up in that calm way, to be frank and quite forthright about the things that I did, not going, oh, no, not that, but actually being forthright, this is what I did. And open, not guarded, not defended, open. We will be gratified with the results. And so what I'm going to screen share with you guys is a way in which I have found it helpful, kind of pulling from the directions that we see about how it can be really helpful to make amends. And in step 9, the first part of it is the why am I here? And often this is the approach. So this is what I'll text them or, Facebook them, or, you know what I mean? When I find them, I start with the approach. And the approach can be kind of a number of different things. Again, we can say, I've been reflecting upon my life and I can see that I have caused you a lot of harm. And it is important for me to make it right. I would like if you would allow me the opportunity to sit down with you and make an amends. And again, we can say it a whole number of different ways. From there, we schedule it. And then what we do is part 2 is what I did, especially when it says we stick to our own. So I need to stick to my faults. What did I do? And I want to be specific when applicable and focusing on my defects of character. Now, if I have really dived into that 4th column of my resentments, I can take a lot of what, not all of it, but I can take a lot of what I've already written in the 4th column and put it right into part 2 of how I go and make my amends. Similarly, if I'm making amends for my sex or relationship contact, columns 2 and columns 3, I can take a lot of what I wrote and put it in part 2. A lot of what the amends can look like is, I always joke about like slept with your husband, peed on your, stole your car and pee on your carpet. So why don't I use that one? So bear with me. When I had an affair with your husband, that was incredibly selfish, dishonest, and inconsiderate of me. My actions betrayed the trust that you had in your relationship with your partner and with me. That behavior was absolutely unacceptable, and you did not deserve to be treated in that way. When I stole your car, that was dishonest, that was selfish, and that was inconsiderate. I took something that I had no right to take, and as a result, I cause you fear, and I likely cause you fear and damage and worry. And again, that was wrong of me. And when I peed on your carpet, I love the character arc, the development here. We're going to make amends for these things now. And don't laugh at the peeing on the carpet when you're making the amends. But when I peed on your carpet, it was inconsiderate. It was selfish of me. And what happened is, as an alcoholic, I have responsibility to take certain actions that allow me to stay sober. And I was not treating my illness with the due diligence and the care that I needed to do to allow me to be sober and to show up as a person in your life that you needed me to be. As a result, I overdrank, which was my responsibility. And I urinated on your carpet. And then let's be real, what did I probably do? I probably bailed and didn't talk about it ever again and didn't offer to pay it back. And that was dishonest and selfish. And I would like if you would allow me the opportunity to pay for carpet cleaning and to pay you back for that. Oh yeah, because that's the thing. Like if I owe financial amends, I better show up with at least some of the money and a payment plan. So that's how we tie it together. And I don't think I think it's delightful that whole we got an amends in there. All right. And so the next thing that I always think it's helpful to do is to give the other person the opportunity to share. And what I like to do is I like to say, it's that third part. Is there any other way in which I harmed you? Any other way in which I caused you harm? I like to say it kind of like, it was not my intention to leave anything out, but I'm aware there might have been other ways in which I harmed you or things that I might have missed. I would like to give you the opportunity to share with me those now, or share with me anything else you feel I need to know. And this gives them the opportunity. And man, if I want to laser beam into what my defects of character are, tell me. I say that, but a lot of times, honestly, if I'm doing the amends right, doing it thoroughly, I've hit it. Like I've said the things, and that, yeah, man, it's the opportunity for them to share with me. And that's where it's like, listen, we are not arguing, we are not debating. If it is true for them, it is true. They're sharing, this is how you harmed me, this is how I harmed them. And then what I like to do is I like to ask, what can I do to make it right? Because this is about making it right. And I'll let you know, in 9 cases out of 10, that's the next line, but in 9 cases out of 10, you know what they say? Just keep doing what you're doing. You just keep doing what you're doing. I don't know about you, but I'm like, yes, it's a gimme amends. I just got, woo, lemon squeezy. I don't got to do nothing. Keep doing what I'm doing. Heck yeah. No, absolutely not. I got some news. Whenever I make an amends and they tell me what I can do to make it right is keep doing what I'm doing, well, you know what that means? That means I've got to continue to work these 12 steps as a way of life. It is not just something that I do so that I get to stay sober. And it's not just something I do so I can help others, but it is a fulfillment of the commitment to change that I made in step 9 in the amends process. Which, of course, when we get a keep doing what you're doing, it is nice to have a little bit of a gimme. And I'll share with you, I didn't have too many ones that where I had to do too much. But I did have one where I owed an amends to a friend of mine who became an assistant pastor of a church, because of course I did. And I go and I make the amends and I ask if there's anything that I can do to make it right. And he's like, well, you could come to church. And so, so you guys know, I'm not, by the way, 99% of the time, it's like, this was more than enough. Keep doing what you're doing. Don't you worry. But for about a year, I went at 8 in the morning to Filipino Baptist Church, which is not an hour that I thrive at. But I will say the food, amazing. Like if you get a chance to go for the food, it was great. And even though that might not be my expression of spirituality, it was really cool to be able to show up and to hear people talk about their experience of the God of their understanding. And I showed up and I did that for a year. And listen, I was like the remedial student. At the time, I still smoked cigarettes and I was like trying to hide that from them. And I was supposed to wear a dress and I don't have those. But I did the best I could to make it right. And it was a beautiful experience. And so it says in 9 cases out of 10, the unexpected happens. What is unexpected before I go into the amends? It's unexpected that it goes well. I think I'm going to get arrested. I'm going to make amends to mom and she's going to arrest me. Doesn't matter that we've had a relationship and we're talking and everything. You know what I mean? I'm just like, it's going to go bad. But in 9 cases out of 10, it goes well. Sometimes the man we're calling upon admits his own fault. So feuds of years standing melt away in an hour. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. It would be rare not to make progress in an amends. And honestly, like that is, and I got some amends stories that didn't go well. I do have those. And in those cases, like it is okay to explain it. Rarely do we fail to make satisfactory progress. Our former enemies sometimes praise what we are doing and wish us well. Occasionally, they will offer assistance. There's times, some of you guys might know, there's times where we got to have like an amends chain reaction. Like I got to make amends to this one person so I can get the contact information for the other person. You know what I mean? I got to go on an amends tour, as it were. I also had a sponsee, I was like, who owed an amends at a university, a bunch of amends in and around a university. And I was like, we'll make an amends tour band shirt for you if you do that. Listen, I will bribe amends out of people. This is not good for my pocketbook. Anyway, occasionally they will offer assistance. It should not matter, however, if someone does throw us out of his office. We have done our demonstration. We have made our demonstration. We have done our part. It's water over the dam. And so it's that feeling of water over the dam. What is that? Like if I go to make the amends, they're not open. And there are ones where it's like we do maybe check back with them 6 months, a year later, just to see if that has changed because it's still on our heart. But if I've gone and I have gone to make the amends and they're not open, they're not receptive, they've told me, they've thrown me out of their office, it's water over the dam. I let it go and I move on to the next. You see, what's my biggest fear around amends? I'm worried about the results. And the truth is, I'm not in the results business. I got fired from that. That's God's business. And so I leave that in God's hands. That's a beautiful question. There's a question of how do you make amends to a coworker if they don't know you're an alcoholic? We don't have to tell them that we're an alcoholic. We could just say, hey, I was wondering if I could talk to you for 10 minutes. I was really thinking about what happened last week. My behavior at the office or at the shop, that wasn't okay. I was incredibly selfish and inconsiderate when I did this, that sort of thing. And hey, you know what? I might have missed some things. Is there any other way which I harmed you? And let me know what I can do to make it right. We don't have to tell them we're in 12 step. We don't have to tell them we're an alcoholic. There are times where that is helpful. There's times, man, if I'm making an amends to somebody who I know might have a drinking problem or a drug problem or a problem that might require God's help, maybe it's a good idea. I'll let them know, but I don't have to let them know. Does that make sense? We can just say, hey, I was a dick and I would like to not be that way anymore. Can I try to make that right? Double check on the verbiage on that. Like I said that with a lot of confidence and I'm like, run that language by your sponsor. I don't think that's how we do it. Anywho. As dick calling ourselves a dick. That was anywho. So that is, well, I was going to say that's the place to leave it, but that's the place in the book to leave it. So why don't I stop the recording? We'll wrap it up there and say the serenity prayer. And we'll keep going in steps 8 and 9 over the next few weeks. So thanks for joining.